Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Encounter 300 or 300. This is random! That's a horribly dated joke from a movie that came out in 2006. But, you know, like that movie, we're all pretty old here. So joining me on today's 300th episode of Random Encounter is Mr. Mike Sollosi.
Hi, I am alarmed to be the youngest person on a podcast on RPGFan for once.
Mm-hmm. Mike, and by Mike I mean our boss.
I don't really like how everyone's getting called out here, but hello.
And Hilary.
Hello. I'm doing some quick mental math to figure out exactly how many months between Sollosi and I, age-wise.
I think I'm the oldest here. Or Mike, are you the oldest here?
I'm
July 28th,
sure
1984.
I'm sure it's not you.
If it's helpful, I was born the exact same month that The Legend of Zelda released in Japan.
It's a sign of just how much of a nerd I am that actually is helpful. So yeah, this is episode 300. So I have assembled the hosts of the various RPG fan podcast. Mike Sollosi. Sollosi, you host Retro Encounter.
I do, and we hit episode 300 a while ago, but I'm very much excited to be part of this episode 300. I mean, and you and I also were on episode 200 of Random.
We were.
Oh my goodness, was that 4 years ago?
That was recorded on, let me see here, that was recorded on, released on October 28th, 2020.
Yeah, so almost just under 4 years ago. That's crazy.
It's crazy. Also joining us are the hosts of Rhythm Encounter, Hilary and Mike. So I really want to thank all of you for coming and making time to join the podcast and to celebrate episode 300.
Well, yeah, it's a big milestone.
Yeah.
I like what we're doing here today, so I'm happy to be here.
Speaking of what we're doing here today, we're doing something a little bit different. I just blatantly ripped off Sollosi and was like, we're doing a draft. Because Sollosi, you do love your drafts.
I do. It's true. And we're not a million miles away from professional football draft season, so this is, you know, a little more appropriate than otherwise having it in, say, January. But yeah, draft episodes, they're fun. Let's do one.
Yeah. So for this episode, I figured because so much can change in 4 years. The gaming industry is vastly different now than it's certainly different than it was in 2020. And we thought it would be an interesting experiment, fun thing to do a prediction draft. So I have written 31 predictions that could happen between now and when episode 400 comes out, which will be on April 9th, 2028, which doesn't even sound like a real year. And I figured that we're going to make some predictions now. We're going to draft some of the predictions from the list. And then in 4 years from now, we're going to go back. We're going to talk to each other. And whoever wins, I'm going to buy you a video game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, making things interesting. Or alternatively, I guess I'm saving myself around $70 or however much games will go for if I win.
So you're telling me that Yakuza 7 came out in 2020 and Like a Dragon 8 came out in 2024. All right. I already know what I'm going to ask for.
Incentive for Sollosi to win this draft. Not that much incentive was needed, but
actually, I'm a little bit concerned now. What would happen if Yakuza 9 comes out on like April 1st, 2028? Because I feel like episode 400 is going to get
two
bumped.
Copies.
Episode 400 is going to get bumped for a Yakuza episode or Like a Dragon episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the plan. And we're just going to go one by one. We're going to pick 4 each because I've done 31. I don't want the audience to be sitting here for 3.5 hours as we pick all of them. So we have a vast array of predictions. Maybe at the end I'll share the ones that aren't picked. But so we're going to go through them and we're going to talk a little bit about each prediction, why we think that prediction might actually happen. So let's just hop right in. So we've determined the order beforehand based on the last person to play a Like a Dragon game. And Sollosi, you are the last person to have played a Like a Dragon game.
A little surprising, but yeah, I was doing some trophy cleanup on Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth about 2 weeks ago, which is, I guess, won our little contest.
Yep. And Mike and Hilary, you two played Yakuza 0 very recently.
And two
And
most
two.
recently.
Oh, you played Kiwame too. And I'm ashamed. The last time I played a Like a Dragon game was when I reviewed Infinite Wealth a few months ago. So I will be going last. So Sollosi, the field is yours. You can have your first pick of any of these wonderful possible predictions.
Right. Well, I want to say right out the gate. Now, Jono already alluded to this, but I did not write any of these. So these are predictions that I'm choosing from a list written by Jono. If I were writing my own predictions, these would have gone very differently. But with that said, there are a couple that I'm fairly confident in anyway. And the first overall pick is going to be Silksong is released.
Oh, that is bold right there.
Well, the thing is, it's become a joke that Hollow Knight, which was like a 2016 or 2017 game, then got an expanded console release a couple years later. They've been teasing Silksong since 2019 or 2020. They're just being ultra perfectionist about it because Hollow Knight's gained in popularity since those releases, and when word of mouth had it gained in popularity more. So I think expectations are very high for Silksong, but there have been a lot of near misses, like people found Silksong on like a release list in Korea or something. So I think it's coming soon-ish. If this prediction was Silksong comes out in 2024, I probably wouldn't draft it. But this means before May of 2028. I think it's going to be by then. My official thoughts are Silksong is probably a 2025 game, but that's still less than 2028, so it gets pick number 1.
I like it.
I do too, and I think it's a very safe bet. I put it on there primarily for the meme factor at this point. But, Sollosi is playing to win.
I only draft to win, and I still have regrets about the Suikoden draft from 3 years ago.
Okay, here's the thing, and we can debate whether or not this is the case. With Silksong being released, given how long it's taken, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of massive pivot in development and they just announced like Hollow Knight 2 and they've made Silksong into Hollow Knight 2. Do you think that would still count?
Yeah, because I'm sure it would still be the same game they were trying to deliver, just more of it or something like that.
If it's clearly the same game, if it still starts as Hornet, Sollosi, you get it. But if it's completely different, if it looks completely different, then we'll have to reevaluate that.
Sure, we can take it into arbitration, but
yeah,
I think that I don't think they're going to abandon the name Silksong after this long.
No way.
And Hornet is a very, very clear fan favorite character.
She's great. She's a great character.
Yeah, she's her battle theme is maybe my favorite song in the whole game.
It's so good.
So like I want to hear that song in Silksong.
And that's saying something because that soundtrack is unbelievably good.
It's a real good soundtrack.
Yep. Okay, so Silksong is released. Up next is Hilary or Mike. You both played Kiwame 2 at the same time, so which one of you would like to go first?
Okay, I will go. Also, I'll throw it out here. I think it's still coming out this year, if you want to be bold about it. I'm very willing to be wrong, but I really think it could be this year.
I would love for it to be a 2024 game for the fans, but quietly I'm hoping it doesn't come out this year because the back half of 2024 is already loaded.
Yeah.
And there's like a day one purchase I want, I think every single month from August to November, which is too many. So, Silksong, please wait until 2025, please and thank you.
Okay, not to mention the just extremely expensive games that a lot of people are still playing that released earlier this year, too.
Yeah.
I broke my brain a little bit playing Infinite Wealth, Rebirth, and Eiyuden back to back to back.
That's a lot, yeah. Okay, so next year. Let's have it next year. All right.
I'm fine with that.
So my prediction... first of all, we have to eliminate 2/3 of these, because only 10 of these are about RPGs. I hope you're aware of that.
Oh no! We have to restart the episode.
Yeah,
not the genre police.
Yeah, I absolutely would have picked the Silksong one because I'm totally with Sollosi on that. But I was like, if I don't go first, someone will get that.
I should have said genre gendarme instead. Darn.
All right, mine is number 16. Not that we really need to number them, but for my own self. Several big indie studios are going to join together to create a brand new studio or publisher. There is so much of that happening right now, and I don't like a lot of it. Or at least I don't like the big companies buying other big companies, and I think it's just getting to be kind of a mess in some situations. But at the same time, a lot of new indie companies are springing up. And sometimes they're people from big studios that went off on their own, and sometimes they're just brand new people. And I love it. Like the indie scene just continues to be more interesting. But I can see, as some of them see more success, that maybe some of them will like band together to create something else. I think that's how, I don't know exactly, like Freedom Games or some of these smaller publishers that keep gaining in popularity with indie games. Like, I feel like that's kind of how maybe some of them started, was like just more and more separate people, separate groups coming together and building on it. Also, I know they're not called Freedom Games anymore, but until a few weeks ago, they were.
I actually, first off, this is the first steal for me. This was my number one. This was going to be my number one pick because I really like this idea, and I think that it might just happen. Because I think a lot of indie developers, smaller developers, are looking at, like, there was the gold rush a few years ago where Microsoft especially was just like buying up smaller studios. And I think that a lot of these smaller studios looked at what happened and they're thinking, wow, I could get theoretically rich off the initial purchase, but then there's a good chance one of my games will fail and it will just be dead. And that's not an appealing prospect. Whereas I think the only way for an actual competitor in this industry to spring up is if a larger entity is born out of several smaller ones. So I could actually see this happening, and I think it would be a very good thing for the industry, providing it was successful.
Well, the thing is, even if a game is successful, they still might be victim to consolidation. Like Hi-Fi Rush released last year to a lot of acclaim, and then Microsoft shut down that Japanese studio earlier this year. And I mean, you can insert whatever joke about an Embracer Group you want to. But I think we talked about this the last time I was on Random Encounter, but we're in the middle of an industry realignment when basically a lot of the what's the word I'm thinking of? A lot of the like angel investor money that that exploded in the early 2020s is starting to not pan out how people planned, and now they're in a consolidation and equity phase. So there's a huge amount of studio shutdowns and layoffs that are very depressing.
Yeah.
But the as part of that realignment, indie studios banding it together to protect themselves is a possible outcome. This was not very high on my draft board. It was probably near the middle, but I look at smaller publishers like Big Mode, which just came out with their first game, Animal Well, a month or so ago.
Which I hear is very good.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle Metroidvania. It's I would recommend checking a video to get your own idea of how that thing is. But I think that there's going to be more acquisitions, more shutdowns. We're in the middle of a realignment. It's not a full blown crash or failure, but it is ugly, and this would almost be like a positive footnote if this indie studio collective were to happen. But I wasn't that confident in this future, so it wasn't on my draft board really. It was, again, near the middle of the list.
I think that, well, first off, if there ever was a video game crash at this point, it would not be like it was in the 80s. If there was a video game crash at this point, it would be a full-blown massive economic crisis for multiple countries around the world, because the industry has just gotten to be so incredibly massive that if it ever collapsed, if it collapses, I think it's going to collapse as a result of a bigger collapse, at which point we have bigger problems than actually playing video games. Okay, I think that's a good one. Hilary, you are up next. Which would you like to be your first pick?
Oh, geez. Well, I honestly think I'm here to introduce an element of risk and chaos.
Ooh. Oh, really? Okay.
Are you going to take a 3-point shot already?
I just can't resist picking things that are interesting to me versus actually being strategic and picking things I think are likely to happen.
Okay.
So this one's a little bit of both, depending on how you look at it. I think I'm going to do the AI one. A major game is developed using AI, and that's mostly based on the fact that multiple studios are looking into it or using some assets or little elements of it here and there. So depending on how we want to qualify that, how much AI, what qualifies as using AI.
Right. Well, there's another entry on this list about AI. But I think what you're saying is this is not using AI to model like strands of hair or blades of grass. This is using AI to develop a creative or mechanical aspect of a game, right?
Yeah, that's the question.
Well, yeah, I mean, AI as a tool in the toolbox being used in game development is probably already happening.
It's already happening, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm picturing that. Here's what I'm picturing with this pick. I'm picturing like this CNN article in a few years that says this massive AAA game was developed using using AI, and that kind of spin. It's not just a matter of like, okay, someone used it to develop a texture or to like workshop some ideas. Like it was a significant tool that was used in the development of the game. Very similar to how I don't know, like an engine would be used.
Right.
I think Hilary, I think this is a smart pick because I think this is inevitable. As depressing as it sounds, I think it's inevitable.
Someone's going to try it. I really think that's my justification for this one because it's already been implemented in small ways. Someone's going to do it just to say they can. Probably someone with a lot of money to burn who can take the risk.
Yeah, I mean, it was on my list too, only not because I want it to happen, because someone will do it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that this one was near the middle of my list, and the other AI topic bullet point was a bit higher on my list.
That's fair.
But I think that like using AI in computing as like the analogy I said before, as a tool in the toolbox is already happening.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about is an executive pitching an AI developed game and then telling his engineers or developers to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And that's probably already happening. The issue is, will there be a functional game developed entirely or mostly by AI by 2028?
Right.
And that's really hard to predict because, I mean, many of the smartest thinkers in the world are trying to predict what AI is going to be capable of next and when. And we know that language learning models are able to at least replicate things like essays and stories. And also replicate art based on prompts and existing databases. But I mean, a game has so many moving parts. It's audio, visuals, player input, and multiple gameplay systems. That's so much. I think my feeling is it's more than 4 years until when we get a true large budget game developed by AI.
Fair.
But because I mean, if they tried to do that now, it would look like the jankiest PS1 demo you've ever heard of.
Right.
But all the people have 6 fingers on each hand.
No. I mean, I think the fingers would have 6 fingers in each finger.
Right.
I mean, I also don't want to be cautious about AI predictions because they have outpaced most people's thoughts and fears. Mm-hmm. So my instinct was to stay away from the AI one. So I'm not upset that you got it, Hilary.
Oh, okay. That's fair. And
you know what?
Yeah, I think it really is a matter of like exactly at what point do we qualify it as developed by AI, right? Is it mostly like story? Is it story and some element of graphics? And how many, because there are so many moving parts, I guess I was kind of thinking along those lines. I
think this is the kind of thing that, again, we'll talk about it and we'll just, it when you see it, that sort of thing. I don't know if though, I could, looking at this from a business perspective, I could see one of the studios that you'd expect, let's just EA or Ubisoft, partnering with OpenAI and getting access to some of their tools and say large amounts of this game were developed using OpenAI's processing and AI and large language models to create character models or to do the backgrounds.
All the NPC dialogue is AI.
Exactly. That's another one actually. Or all of the NPC dialogue in this was spoken by our AI models, like that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
Like I can see that happening, and by doing it, I think they get crucified. But that's why I only think a company like EA or Ubisoft would do it, because for them being is baked into the cake. That's not a statement on their quality. That's a statement on how people will respond to them. Like if Square Enix tried to do it, they would get murdered by the online community. If EA did it, everyone would be like, yeah, that makes sense.
That's true.
Okay, that's a depressing but very good pick, Hilary.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go for my first pick, and I think this is more me putting a marker down more than I think will actually happen. I think that in the next 4 years, God, I hope in the next 4 years, Nintendo's new console is going to be released, and it will be called the Super Nintendo Switch. If it's not released by 2028, there's a small part of me that won't be surprised, but I think it will. And I think that a lot of people have said this in the last few years. It's the low-hanging fruit, but it's so good. It calls back to retro memories. They can get a lot of mileage out of the nostalgia. Even in Japan, where it wasn't called the Super Nintendo, it was called the Super Famicom. They could, just by using the Super part of that, they'd be able to call back on their history. And also, I happen to think that the Super Nintendo Switch is a pretty good title, a pretty good name of a system. So if it was called the Super Nintendo Switch, I would actually be quite happy.
Oh, okay. Question, Jono. Is it your turn next, or is it my turn next?
This is my turn, so it's your turn next.
Okay. I'm just going to do my pick right now so we can talk about them at the same time. I'm going to pick Nintendo's new console is released. It is not called the Super Nintendo Switch.
I'm glad both of these markers have been put down.
Now, the thing is, Sony has a pretty easy nomenclature system ahead of them. The next PlayStation is one more than the previous PlayStation. And that's done very well for them, because basically all 5 PlayStations, or 4 out of the 5 PlayStations, have sold way above expectation over the 30 years of PlayStation. But Nintendo does not have any rhyme or reason to their nomenclature. When they their most successful system ever before the Switch was probably the Wii, and when they did the follow-up to the Wii, they wanted to communicate that it was still a Wii, but then but also add more. And they really could have said Super Wii or Wii 2, but they went with Wii U. It was a little confusing, and the Wii U was about as successful as the PlayStation Vita. Both of them sold like around 15 million units. So, and that's, I don't know if that's a bigger insult to the Wii U or the Vita, probably both. But the thing is,
there's lots of room to make fun of both, Sollosi. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, the thing is, I think the Switch is a massive success. It's already had a life cycle of 7 years, which is, I think, longer than any other Nintendo console, except for maybe the NES. The Switch is such a success that I think they'd be crazy to completely abandon that name. I don't think they're going to call it the Super Switch, and I don't think they're going to call it the Switch 2. I think they're going to try to do some other word after Switch to communicate the new feature that they're going to put into it.
God, it'd be funny if they called it the Switch U.
Oh God! That's not a million miles away. I really think like something like the Switch X or the Switch Connect or the Switch Attach or the Switch Plus are possibilities. I mean, the new 3DS was so confusing; people don't even realize that was a separate hardware SKU.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm still annoyed that there was a couple like Super Nintendo emulation was exclusive to the new 3DS, and that's a whole different conversation. But I think that I think that the Switch is coming out, probably announced later this year and coming out in 2025.
Yep,
I would be stunned if it wasn't.
I think that's very, very likely.
Absolutely, because ignoring everything else, Metroid Prime 4 is clearly a game that is going to struggle on the Switch.
Right,
and probably wouldn't on a follow-up.
I think that the new Pokemon game, Legends EA, is probably going to be a regular Switch game that they that maybe gets enhancements on the Switch, on the new Switch, or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
But I think Super Nintendo Switch or Super Switch is unlikely, because it I don't know, maybe they just I think that they always try to communicate a system's new features or its form factor or something in their names, and I think that also maybe they just don't want to call it the SS.
It wouldn't be. We would call it the SNS.
Yeah,
SNS is also something, but a little bit less problematic than SS.
I agree with I agree with everything that you said, Sollosi. I think it's a matter of has Nintendo learned their lesson? Nintendo does what I said this a few days. Nintendo does what everyone else don't. Because they're in their own little bubble. They do whatever the hell they want. They aren't really paying attention to industry trends. They are intentionally releasing underpowered game systems that your phone could run laps around. And I think that the temptation for nostalgia as to hit a certain age group would be almost overwhelming for them. That being said, you're probably right. They'll probably choose another name. I mean, logically, if they learned their lesson, they wouldn't call it the Switch at all. They would call it something else because to avoid the Wii U debacle altogether. But I don't know. My honest to God thing is I don't think they want to give up the snap. I think they love the snap. They love snapping more than anything in the directs.
I mean, I do too.
I don't think they want to give it up.
I mean, yes, they want. I think they want to keep the name Switch. I just don't think it's going to be the Super Switch or Super Nintendo Switch.
I don't know. See, I'm going to chime in now too if I can, because that was going to be one of mine. That it's not going to be called that, just because, like you said, Jono, like Nintendo constantly does what they want to do, and no matter how many of us will be like, oh boy, they're going to regret doing that, it usually works out in the end. Usually. They have the Wii and then the Wii U.
They avoid the consequences.
And then the Switch. So like they do sometimes gamble with it. But then there's also the fact that, I don't want to use like the Wii U and like their decisions back then and like, oh no, like we're going to do something weird and confuse people, because like there is slightly different leadership now versus 12 years ago. So I don't know. That's the interesting thing about them, because my first instinct would be no, they're going to call it something totally different, and they're not going to make it backwards compatible, because why would they ever do that? And they'll have another separate platform from Virtual Console and Nintendo Switch Online. And I want to say all that, but then they've built up all this stuff so much, and the Switch has been so incredibly successful.
And it's had a long life cycle.
Yeah, like I think it has to be somewhere in the middle. Even for Nintendo, who likes to like completely start from scratch each time, like the library of games on the Switch, especially like indie games and like everything so many things now are like Switch, PC and Switch. So they don't even bother with PlayStation. They'll be everything's on Switch.
As long as the Switch can handle it, which is not every game.
And sometimes even if it can't.
Yes.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to keep something. They're going to have some kind of through line. I don't think it's going to be like a PlayStation 4 and 5 thing where like they sell it as like Sony does, like, oh, upgrade to this next one. It'll be separate, but I think it'll probably have a separate name, but I think it's going to have some connection to like play Switch games.
I really do think. Oh, is this your next pick, Mike?
Oh no! I mean, I was just trying
to get to that in 1 second.
Okay, because there's one thing on the list similar to that, but
Yep.
no, I basically agree that it's going to have Switch in the name. I just don't think it's going to be Super Switch. And I mean, Nintendo has far more hits than misses over the years. Like, I mean, the Wii U and Virtual Boy were failures. The N64 and GameCube lost very badly to their PlayStation counterparts, but even those weren't total failures.
They weren't failures.
Yeah, I mean, but still, like 4 times as many PS1s sold than N64s, and it was something like 6-1 for the GameCube and PS2. So like that's still a disappointment for Nintendo. But the Switch is a absolutely unquestionable success, and the new one is gonna have Switch in the name somewhere. I just don't think it's going to be Super Switch. I'm repeating myself now.
No, I think that's I think that your stance is completely logical. I really like the name Super Switch, so I'm going to stand by it and hope to hell it happens, because I would enjoy owning a Super Nintendo Switch. Anyway, let's move on to the next one now, which is Mike. So what is your second pick?
Okay, can I tweak like one word in it and then use it?
Of course.
Okay. I like the one of Bethesda delaying Elder Scrolls 6 to make a new Fallout game.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if I would use the word delays because there's no actual window or anything for Elder Scrolls 6.
Yeah, they'll never say we've delayed it.
No, but I do think with the success they've had with the TV show and the attention it's getting, I could see them putting out a new Fallout before Elder Scrolls 6 happens. Whether they call it a delay or not, they'd be like, surprise, we're doing more Fallout. Maybe it will replace Fallout 76. I don't know, but I could see that happening. Again, it's Bethesda, so it won't be next year, but within 4 years, maybe. I think they could release a game within 4 years.
I still can't believe that Bethesda was caught with their pants down about the success of the Fallout TV show. The fact of the matter is people were absolutely flocking to Fallout 4. Fallout 4, desperate for more Fallout. And I mean, that's great that their extremely old game got a massive boost number and a lot of more downloads and purchases. But you don't think that they would have liked to have had an announcement at this not E3 saying, and we have a new Fallout game coming out in the fall.
Right.
I think that they did not expect the success of the show. I thought they expected it was going to be successful. I didn't think it was going to be this successful.
I feel like that there was a plan for this to be released in the same window as the game, but either the show got delayed or the game got delayed or both, because it's very difficult to tell in like the earliest planning stage how long a project like this will take. So like I'm sure they at some point they intended for overlapping release windows.
Yeah.
But it definitely didn't happen.
The intention was there.
Yeah. So I think this is a good pick. It was medium high on my list, but the thing is, I just don't know how close to finish whatever the next Fallout game is, or Elder Scrolls. So like
apparently it's, according to Todd Howard, it hasn't even started yet.
Yeah, because I have no idea what the development cycle is or at what point in the cycle any of those are. I just did not have any confidence in predicting one happening before the other. But Bethesda is kicking themselves. They wish they had a shiny, relatively new Fallout game to wave at people, and they don't have that.
Well, they have Fallout 76.
Well, there's that DLC. Yeah.
Yeah.
With the marshmallow guy or whatever.
Pretty much. See, I put this down and I don't think it's going to happen. However, I do think that there is going to be a new Fallout game, and I think it will probably be released within 6 months of season 2 of the Fallout TV show. I would not be surprised if Bethesda has shopped this out to a third party, to another studio.
Yeah, now that they have a win on their hands, like the Fallout show sequel like matching the window of a Fallout game sequel is now that they know there's demand on both of these tracks, they're going to try and have them match next time.
Yeah.
But I also just have no idea what the next Fallout game is or when it's going to come out or anything about that. Like I am a complete zero.
Like I don't think Bethesda's not going to be the developer; they'll be the publisher. I don't think that Obsidian is going to do it, because as much as everybody wants Fallout New Vegas 2, Obsidian's busy, and more importantly, they have their own quite successful IP in Pillars of Eternity, and with their games coming out in the Outer Worlds.
Yeah, Avowed comes out in like 3 months.
Yeah, so they're busy, but there are many other studios around that would probably be absolutely delighted to take a shot at a Fallout game. And I would wager that they are. I don't think it's going to be Bethesda Game Studios, though. I don't think it's going to be Todd as director. I don't think they're going to delay the Elder Scrolls 6, but I do think they're going to have something to come out before Elder Scrolls 6 from another studio that's Fallout.
See, I wish that was on the list. Actually, I think I love that idea. I would love to see. I don't have a studio in mind offhand, but there's a lot of talented studios
Yoko Taro's Fallout.
Okay, I'm sold.
I wish that Bethesda had the balls to do that.
That would be amazing.
Just give it to a video game auteur and just see what they do with it. That would be amazing.
When I saw Yoko Taro's social media post many years ago about how he would develop a Monster Hunter game, I think I had to turn off my laptop and go lie down for a little while. He was talking about like the longer you the more monsters you kill, the more villagers die and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, it's like, I mean, I want him to keep making games, but also I need to emotionally prepare myself for at least several months in advance.
Yeah,
right. There's no Yoko Taro on this draft board, so I can slow my roll here.
We're safe for now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, what we're not safe from is Hilary's next pick.
Oh yeah,
Hilary's next pick.
More chaos.
More chaos.
More chaos. Throw the grenade in the room.
Maybe less chaos this time.
Because you want to win.
I'm trying to figure out which one I want to do next. The order is tricky. Okay.
Rule number 1 of drafts is don't pick your favorites first. Pick your favorite that someone else is more likely to get first. And why am I helping my opponents?
Pick the low-hanging fruit, not the ones you want to happen.
It's much appreciated. I always just go through and pick what I want to happen.
Yeah, I do too.
Except for the AI. You know what? I'm going to go for Sony announces a portable console to compete with the Switch successor and the Steam Deck.
That is an interesting one, because unlike Microsoft, Sony actually has some experience in this area.
That's what I was thinking, and maybe part of this is just because I miss the Vita.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have some thoughts about this. If you want to go first, go ahead, Hilary.
No, go ahead.
This is near the bottom of my list.
That's fair.
Because I'm one of the biggest PSP fans that I know. I own 2 broken PSPs and 1 functional one and a Vita. I really enjoyed sort of so many games coming out on DS and PSP around the same time in the late 2010s. It's one of my favorite sort of mini eras of video games. But the thing is, the PS Vita was not a big success, and the PS4 and PS5 have a run of sustained success. I think Sony knows that their video games business is on consoles, and they're never going to be able to seriously challenge Nintendo in the portable space. So but now there's more competition in the portable space because the Valve Steam Deck is a huge success, and like Steam's library might be completely unrivaled because that's just like most of the computer games ever made.
Absolutely.
But so the thing is, I mean, I think Sony is very interested in big budget games on PlayStation, and they're very interested in VR. But I think that the handheld space is not something they're going to hit again in the next 4 years. The competition's too dense right now. The Vita was not a success. I love my PlayStation Vita. I played Suikoden 1 and 2 on that thing. But yeah, I just don't believe in this one.
That's fair. I think the thing that makes it possibly slightly more realistic for me is the introduction of that new competition. And in some ways, if something dramatic happens, some sort of shift happens because of that competition, I could see them maybe starting something. But yeah, this is really does kind of go into the camp of things I like, but maybe aren't the most likely.
Well, hang on. Were you going to mention the Portal?
I was actually, yeah.
Because my comment was like, wow, no one's even mentioned the PlayStation Portal
right,
yet,
and
which
that
is
was
really funny and telling.
So, but that's interesting, and I was thinking about it. I was going to mention it actually because that could either be like an argument against, while they're trying this other thing. So why would they do it? But it might also be an argument for, because maybe it's showing they're still interested in thinking about it. So I don't know.
They're thinking about it in a weird way. Yeah. And I actually missed when the Portal released because I just didn't hear them talking about it. And it's just like, yeah, it's there. So I don't know. I don't know how much faith they have in that or if it has legs.
Mm-hmm. But then, what if they're doing it and they don't have faith in it? Maybe that means they could do another handheld console. Who knows?
Here's what I'm thinking about a handheld console from Sony. I do not think that Sony would release a console that is a standalone, has software developed solely for that console, because that requires multiple new teams, new people have new developers. They need to get new hardware. They need to develop games in a different way. That creates an entire development pipeline for games. I would not be surprised if they announced a portable console that could play PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 games, and then alongside that, PlayStation 6 games through cloud computing. Or through the cloud.
I think if a Sony portable unit happens, it's something that plays existing PSN games that can also play on the cloud and take advantage of PS Plus.
Yeah,
basically a Steam Deck that goes to the PSN library instead of the Steam library. But even then, I think that the market being very crowded with the Steam Deck and Switch, which aren't really competing with each other, I don't see it.
I think that a PlayStation Portal 2, like a next generation one that actually does play PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 games with reduced resolution and does what the PlayStation Portal does with the PS5 right now, allows you to stream games in your house. I buy that. I think that is a product that Sony could release and would probably do fairly well. Not amazingly, but fairly well. I think this is possible. I don't think it's going to be like the PlayStation 6, though. I don't think it's going to be their next mainline console. But releasing a portable console, that seems to be where a lot of the market's going. There's a lot of rumors about Microsoft right now. Phil Spencer won't shut the hell up about it. All right, let's move on to my next choice. I'm going to continue down my path of things that wild and crazy. Like, I'm getting most of these wrong, by the way, because I'm not going for the low-hanging fruit on this list. if I was going for the low hanging fruit on this list, I would pick E3 Returns, then is canceled again soon after. So I am going to go for What do I want to go for here? I'm going to go for the next 3D Legend of Zelda game will be the third game in a Breath of the Wild trilogy. Again, I have no proof about this whatsoever. There is nothing that Nintendo has released that says this is even a possibility. But along that same page, we were stunned when they say they're developing a sequel to Breath of the Wild. Remember that slide? Everyone lost their minds. I think that a trilogy of Zelda games is something that Nintendo's never done. They have a sequel. They have the 2. I think that creating a third one in this world, maybe not entirely this world map, like I could see them maybe visiting other lands that were in other versions of the game, in other iterations of the game, Termia, for example, would be a interesting thing to explore. I just think it's a really interesting idea that Nintendo would follow up on. I think that maybe not even following the same Link and Zelda, maybe they're their descendants. But it would be interesting to see a Hyrule that is considerably more built up and successful. Like what could spring up from the Hyrule of Tears of the Kingdom. I would love to see that. I don't know. I think it's a possibility because honestly, I can't figure out where the hell where else they would go. Like open world Zelda, that they've done it. They kind of perfected it. I think that doing another iteration would be a smart and logical choice. And I think it's a game that I would enjoy seeing what they come up with.
This is a tricky one because, I mean, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were massive.
Yep.
That's just a very, very plain fact. I think the next big 3D Zelda game will be like those two games. There will be, like, people can point to the similarities between them the same way you can, say, like, point out similarities on how, I don't know, on how, like, Twilight Princess's design informed what eventually would be Skyward Sword. Like,
yeah, well, that's sort of how it goes.
Yeah. The next Zelda game will be like those. Whether it's going to be a direct continuation or experimenting with a new Link and Zelda and a new setting, that's a coin flip to me. But I mean, there was some finality to the storyline in Tears of the Kingdom, but they could also do a Link's Awakening thing where Link's Awakening is an alleged direct sequel to A Link to the Past, but Link is just sailing off to a new land.
Mm-hmm.
Like so it could be just this is the same Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Link and Zelda, but they're going to a new place. But I mean, what constitutes it being a part of a trilogy and whether they want to keep this exact Link and Zelda, I don't have any thoughts on that. But then the next big 3D Zelda will have a lot of structural and stylistic similarities to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I think that's a certainty.
Just for clarity about my pick, I mean that this is a direct sequel.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought.
Yeah. I think that they've, frankly speaking, this is the first time they've actually created a Link and Zelda that people actually care about, especially Zelda. I think this Zelda is actually one of Nintendo's best characters they've ever created. I think I think there's still a lot to mine there. And it will be interesting to see if they do it. It'd be interesting to see what they do if they don't do it, actually. But yeah.
Look, I won't have any Tetris slander on this show. I don't. Okay. I would like to see it on one hand, but I don't see it happening. And I don't want to be like just based on like what they've said, but like they've even gone on record saying like they're not even going to do DLC. Like they've specifically said like we've gotten all we can possibly get out of this world, this version of Hyrule. So I guess I could see if they decided to do a sequel with, again, that Link and Zelda, but it would have to be somewhere else. I really think they've gotten to the point, especially by the second game, where this is like the definitive version of this Hyrule. I don't think there's anywhere else to go with that if it's set in Hyrule. They've said like what we've already said here, like this style of game is what they're going to do for the next one. So I'm sure that is going to happen. Whether it's the same Link and Zelda, I don't know. But I don't see how they could do this style of game again and also have it in Hyrule again, at least Hyrule as we know it. Unless they went like something really wild, like a Hyrule in the far future. And don't get me started on a sci-fi Zelda, because I would be all over that, and I know that won't happen.
I think a lot of people would be quite excited.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So like, I think if it was Hyrule, it would have to be so different,
Removed.
so
Yeah.
it didn't feel like this, and I wouldn't consider it a direct sequel at that point. So I don't know. Again, I think it would have to be a different land.
Yeah, I agree. I think the evidence points to similar in many ways, but key differences that would make it difficult to call it a direct sequel.
Yeah.
Incidentally, I in no way say this thing is going to be released in the next 4 years. I just think that whatever it is will be announced in the next 4 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Thankfully, this should be, damn it. This episode will be airing in April, which is going to be just before not E3 or whatever the equivalent is in 2028. So that would be disappointing, but oh well.
There were 6 years in between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So a 4-year development cycle for big 3D Zelda is a little optimistic, but possible.
Sure.
I'm not saying, again, I'm not even saying that we're going to see screenshots. I just think that we are currently working on the sequel to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, that kind of thing. Basically the exact same slide. But we'll see. Okay, let's move on to the third pick. So, Sollosi, you are up. Which do you want to pick on the list?
Right. I feel like the lowest hanging fruit for me is something I believe in that's related to the Switch, but I've already I think I've shot my Switch shot for the most part. So I want to do a slightly more businessy pick. 2 or more significant video game developers unionize.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that is... I think that would be welcome news for the industry.
I was going to pick that one.
Sega of America's employees unionized earlier this year, and all of the Q&A testers for Activision Blizzard / Microsoft unionized only a month or two ago.
Yeah.
And that's several hundred. That's, I think, over 600 workers. So I think that video games as a business, there's again, it's going through a restructuring. There's going to be fewer studios. There's the burnout and churn through developers is very high, and the labor of video games is fighting back somewhat.
Right.
So that's extremely encouraging to me. I mean, but I also, maybe this is anti-consumer of me, but I think that video games, or at least AAA ones, should probably cost like $100. Because we've been so married to a $60 price point for so long, which I know is now $70, that people were paying $60 to $80 for specific NES and SNES games.
Exactly.
Right.
In today's money, that's something like over 150. So like video game budgets have skyrocketed, but the price point has basically stayed the same.
True.
And the industry sales are still extremely high, and this is very, very broad strokes, of course. And I think that one of the groups losing money is the low to mid-level video game developers. So they're unionizing, they're fighting back. I'm encouraged every time I hear a video game union story. That Q&A Activision Blizzard tester, their vote was something like, it was something, I don't know the exact numbers, but it was something like 500 votes, and it was almost like 485 to 10 or
almost
something.
unanimous.
Voting in favor, almost unanimous. So I think that there's going to be more unionizations. I mean, the language of this item is significant video game developers. That's
right.
That's arguable depending on like the size of the unions and the size of the studios that unionize. But I believe that probably some larger pre-existing unions, like the one that the Q&A testers joined, are going to get more studios and more groups under their umbrella at the very least. And I personally, I welcome it, but also I think that AAA video games probably should cost way more than they do. I know that one of my favorite games in the past couple of years is Street Fighter 6, and that game came out at $70 like normal, but now they are very, very nakedly sustaining that game's development with character passes and costume passes, which means I'll probably pay $70 at first and then $20 or $30 a year for more characters for another several years. But that's also the only way I can get the game that I want to play. And you bet your ass I've already bought the character pass that has Terry Bogard in it.
I'm sure.
We don't need to talk about DLC models and fighting games, but I think that more unionization is in our future. and it's something I mostly feel good about, even if it means there are fewer AAA releases or if video game prices increase. I welcome it.
I fully support this.
Yeah.
And I just really want to throw Larian in as a kind of case study / example here. Just they had a longer development cycle. They have been very loud and very vocal about
work-life balance,
burnout.
And yeah, exactly. But also they had a lot of venture capital money funding them. They and under existing corporate structures, a development cycle that's that long with that much with that much beta testing and pre-release work is a lot of other developers at that time called it unsustainable. It's like we can't do this in the current structure of video game development, which is why I think the current structure of video game development is going to change.
It's just kind of an example and maybe an indication of the status and the change.
There are executives out there demanding that their studio make the next Baldur's Gate 3, but if they want the next Baldur's Gate 3, it's going to mean paying your employees better, longer development cycles, and possibly unionization.
Yeah,
right.
Well, they don't want the next Baldur's Gate 3. They want the next Baldur's Gate 3 sales.
Right.
There's a big difference between those two things.
Right.
And they don't want to look into what made that happen. They're only looking at the end. Yeah.
This choice was, I mean, I put it on here and I knew it was low-hanging fruit. I kind of wish that I had changed it and said, I'm not taking it away from you, Sollosi, but I kind of wish I changed it to there will be a strike at one of the major video game developers.
Oh, that's more interesting, actually.
Ooh, that's a good one too.
Oh boy,
you can take it if you want. Do you want to switch? I will take a switch.
I'm gonna keep the easier one because I want to win. but if that was the language of that instead, I would still consider it because I think that like
no, I'm going to add that to the list.
Okay, sure. I think that is the way that the video game industry is heading. Like more unionization, more consolidation, and there's going to be some years of struggle and turmoil before they settle into a new equilibrium. And and maybe a strike happens somewhere major, but that's not the one you wrote down, so I'm not going to accept that as a pick.
Understandably. Incidentally, there is now a number 32 on the list if anyone wishes to choose it. You do not need to. Okay, Mike, what is your third pick?
Okay, I almost don't want to do this because it was described earlier as low-hanging fruit, but it entertains me a little bit. So I'm picking E3 returns and then is canceled. Not that I really want anyone to go through that again. And a large part of me doesn't think it'll happen. I really think the ESA and whoever they want to partner with to try it again, like, I don't know if they're going to do it again, or if they are, maybe they won't call it E3. I think they fumbled too many years in a row. I realized that part of that, of course, was, there was a pandemic and they were trying to restructure, but those virtual E3s were disasters. And they were losing me, at least me. I'm not saying everyone, but they were losing me a little bit before that. Like once they started saying like, oh, well, we want to make it a public event and it kept costing more money. And, even before COVID, like some developers were like pulling out or like thinking about, or at least vocally being like, yeah, this costs a lot of money. We're not sure. So like, I don't know how sustainable that would have been even without what happened to it. And then when they decided to cancel it like a month ahead of time last year, I'm like, you even partnering with a company that puts on other events like PAX, like if you couldn't even make it happen there with someone who knows how to do this, I don't know. But at the same time, I imagine they probably want to try it anyway. So I could see them at least attempting something in the next few years, whether it pans out or gets canceled or not.
For those who aren't looking at our draft pick list, number 17 on it is E3 returns, and then number 18 is E3 returns and then is canceled again soon after.
Yeah. Honestly, I think Nintendo Direct, I think Nintendo was one of the biggest reasons that people have really rethought those events.
Nintendo killed them. This is low-hanging fruit, and I agree 100% with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like everyone does it now. Now, granted, it's a lot. It's a lot of showcases to watch every year, but it's also cool because, especially for like so many of them feature indie games and games that would never get shown or seen otherwise. And of course, I don't know what the number is, but I did here recently the amount of money it costs to get on Summer Game Fest, which is not the scale of E3, but apparently it's very expensive to get involved or get featured on there.
However much Summer Games Fest was, I think E3 was more.
Oh, right. Yeah, for sure. But still, if it's like, hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever it might be, it's like really, really tiny developers still can't, make it into that. They couldn't get to E3 and they wouldn't be even be able to do Summer Game Fest. So I'm glad we have all these other smaller showcases. And I think it would be such a hard sell to get anyone to come back to something like that. Depending on it. But PAX works. Several PAXs happen every year. We went to one. It was a fraction the size of E3, but it's not just games and booths. It's merchandise, it's other events and things to do. I think that's what it would have to be to work. You'd have to do more than just have a bunch of games that you have to stand in line for 4 hours to play.
Yeah. This pick really does depend on the hubris of somebody. That E3 is such an identifiable brand that I can't help but feel that somebody in the next 4 years is going to go, we got to do something with it. And I think they will fail immediately. But I think someone will try to do something with the E3 branding and do some kind of a show. But here's the question. Let's say E3 comes back. Let's say E3 comes back as like a much smaller show that's part of Summer Games Fest. I think that would count as E3 returns, even if it returns in a sad little shadow of its former self form.
That's kind of what I was going to say. I think that the likeliest scenario for E3 returning is that Jeff Keighley buys the naming rights of E3 and rebrands Summer Games Fest as E3. But generally speaking, I mean, conventions like this are difficult and expensive. And I attended E3 4 times, which is not nearly as many times as Mike has. But when I spoke to developers there, a lot of them were saying, oh yeah, this is a giant pain in the ass. It gets eyes on our stuff. We do this mostly to see developers from all around the world and hang out and in a big party. But E3 was expensive and difficult and logistically a mess. And running a big expo has so many challenges that I think that Nintendo's Directs and other studios doing similar presentations, I think they like how far cheaper that is.
Right. The benefits of that far outweigh any benefits from like an E3 style expo for them.
There was no danger of me taking either of the E3 related picks here. I don't think it's coming back, but if it were to come back, it's because somebody with a lot of money or a lot of interest in this kind of thing, again, Jeff Keighley is a likely suspect here, buys the rights to it and tries to bring it back. But I don't think it's happening. But I treasure the times I visited E3, especially since I got to meet a bunch of fellow RPGFan staff there. Yeah. I have no confidence in it coming back in a meaningful way.
I like the idea though, because given how public Jeff Keighley decided I'm done with E3 before doing Summer Game Fest and all that, I can't see any reality in which the ESA would approach him, but I could maybe see it the other way around. That would be very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Hilary, you are up with your pick.
Oh, all right.
It's taking all my willpower to not look over at her screen. I'm
I know,
very curious what you have.
You can.
I will look later.
You know what? Let's go with Sony and or Xbox not offering an option for physical games on their next gen console.
Oof.
Okay, this is a controversial one right here.
It is. I'm so in controversy.
I don't think it's controversy in the sense that they're not likely to do it. I mean, it's controversy in that some people are going to be real angry if this happens.
Yep. But I think, honestly, my best guess would probably be Microsoft doing it. I think it all really depends on, if they think their consumer base would accept it. And I think one or the other might cross that threshold. So,
I mean, that's a good point.
I'm going to go for it.
I mean, given how hard they push Game Pass,
right?
It's a digital service. If someone was going to do it, I would see them doing it first.
This was kind of high on my list. I don't think I was going to pick it next round, but it was up there because I think this is the future that they want.
Yeah.
Like cutting out the middleman of disc manufacturing and is something that appeals to them. And also, I mean, you almost have to do a full download game when you buy a game for an Xbox or a PlayStation 5 anyway.
Right.
True.
The worst culprit for me personally was Mortal Kombat 1 had a download that I think was 120 gigs associated with it. And I think that eventually all of the main studios, including Nintendo, want digital only everything, so that games can get to people with fewer costs associated with them more easily. But the difficulty with making this prediction is how ready is the audience for a digital only future.
Right.
And a lot of people are still attached to physical. For me personally, I like a physical collection, but I also like the convenience of just playing a game whenever I want to. And I mean, they've even done some things recently, like again, my favorite game of 2024 so far is Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, and its special editions were digital only. Mm-hmm. If you got the physical of that, you had to get the content of the special editions as DLC. So I think that so many studios and big companies want digital only. I sort of don't think I would have picked this one, because I think it's probably after 2028, which is the deadline for this exercise. But I think digital only consoles will be the future eventually.
I think that it's going to happen. I think that physical media I'm not happy about it, but I think physical media is dying in many ways, especially for things like games, which require just vast amounts of data. And besides, like, the idea of you own your physical copy of the game, you buy the game. It's not a Super Nintendo game anymore. Like, the way that games are designed, developed, patches, massive upgrades, fixing bugs, things like this are just built in. And it just doesn't make sense for them anymore to have an entire distribution system set up to release physical copies of games, when increasingly the only people who are going to be buying games are going to be doing it digitally. Especially, like, maybe not this generation. Like, there'll be outcry of this generation. But if they waited until like the PlayStation 7 or the Xbox, you can't even make fun of Xbox's naming scheme at this point. You can't come up with a joke for it because you're like, I don't know. But definitely not 2 generations from now. I wouldn't be surprised if both of them looked at each other and kind of had a silent agreement to not do physical games in the next one. And I'm sure they'll have some kind of workaround. I'm sure that one of them will be like, there's a USB port right in the front, so if you want a physical version of the game, we sell those too through our special shop, or something, like a bone to throw. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking like disc-based, that kind of thing.
Right.
There's 2 follow-ups I have here. One is that Xbox and Sony have both released driveless versions of their consoles already. And those, I mean, if you're comfortable with digital only, those might have been pretty good deals. The other thing, I mean, I mentioned that the willingness of the audience is one limitation here. The other big limitation, I think, is hard drive sizes, because the PS5 launched with a hard drive space that was, I think it was under a terabyte, like maybe under half a terabyte, which is not enough for a sort of large scale video game collector to have all of their collection on the console at one time. I mean, I have an SSD drive in my PS5 that I installed for PS5 games, and an external hard drive attached to my PS5 for all of my PS4 games, and both of those are filling up. So I think that when they're ready for a digital only console future, it's going to have I think it's going to be more than 4 years personally, but it's also means that, like, hard drive and possibly solid state drive technology needs to be bigger and cheaper for them to be willing to to eat that cost for
right.
it.
They need to account for space.
Well, yeah, especially when you have something like Sollosi just said, like Mortal Kombat over 100 gigs for one game. I mean, I understand.
I'm certain that's not even the biggest one. It's just the biggest one that I've had to do.
Well, but it's way bigger than I would expect for that game. Like, if you told me that, I actually don't remember how big Final Fantasy 14 is, like, on PlayStation, but it's up there with all the expansions. I would never have guessed that a fighting game would be that big. So maybe they need to compress their stuff better too.
My thinking is twofold on this. One, they very easily could say something along the lines of, plus we have built-in expandable storage. All you need to do is put your extra hard drive in and bam, you're ready to go. We make it easy for you. That kind of thing to counteract those claims.
If that was more modular, I mean, I had to pop open my PS5 shell to do that, which was a little scary.
Yeah, I think that modularity might be a solution. Who knows if they'll do it? But two, they also could push the idea that once you finish a game, delete it, but it will always be yours, which is, horseshit. There's a lot of stories about how digital media it's not forever. We all know that at this point, but that's still their line. I think the main thing that would kill them is not the lack of physical games. I think that would absolutely, there'd be outcry from certain people who I would be sympathetic with. I think the EU would lose their absolute goddamn minds at it, because it would make Sony and Xbox the only legal distributors of video games on their respective systems.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point.
Because Apple is in quite a big mess about that now.
Yeah, like every day there's something else with Apple.
I think that their willingness to do this is going to depend on, and I'm not bringing politics into this or mentioning candidates, but it's depending on whether or not they have a more regulation happy or anti-regulation friendly administration in charge of the presidency and the various houses of Congress, because their focus is very clearly on the United States. So if they think they can get away with it, they're getting away with it. If they don't think they're going to get away with it, they're going to do it anyway, and they're going to do everything possible to try to mitigate the consequences. But this is just happening. It's going to happen. And maybe the EU forces them to allow others to open up storefronts. Maybe I don't think it'll happen in 4 years, but maybe in 5 to 6 years, Steam or Epic or somebody have game stores on the PlayStation 6 or the Xbox, whatever.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, and that's I think a natural consequence to losing the option for physical games. I think that's the only reason why there are physical. I think that's the only reason why there are consoles right now that have disk drives in them, is because they know that's going to happen. If they take it away, if they take away that potential avenue of distribution, they're going to get a lot of shit. And to be honest, they're going to deserve it, because that is a ridiculously anti-consumer move. But I think it's an anti-consumer move that's just going to happen. It's just going to happen. And it's unfortunate. I think it's very unfortunate. Okay, let's move on now. Okay, actually, I didn't mean this, but that my little rant there at the end is a real good transition into my next draft pick, which is Steam is available on the Apple App Store.
There you go.
This is, I think this is going to be a fairly controversial pick that might not happen. I think this is more of the spirit of it. I'm not going to hold it. It has to be Steam. I'm not looking for wiggle room. But for me, this is the spirit of the pick, in that Apple right now is under tremendous pressure from the EU. They're being fined, or they're going to be fined daily for the way they are handling the way they've locked down the App Store. They want alternative app stores open. I don't want to get into Apple's whole thing, because that's multiple other podcasts, of which you can find many versions of online. I recommend Upgrade, for example. Excellent podcast about Apple hardware. But once the door is open to alternative forms of digital distribution, I think that there are going to be a lot of companies out there that are going to jump on the bandwagon. And I think that once the door is open, and it will be open, Apple is going to be forced to open it. Otherwise, they're going to have to stop selling the devices in the EU, which they're not going to do. I think Apple would be smart to embrace it. And I think the best way to do that and kill two birds with one stone with their bad gaming track record would be to partner with somebody like Steam, or partner with someone like Epic. Like, Mike, can't you picture the WWDC poster from like 2027 that says we're just letting off a little steam, and like that's the tease,
right?
I can see this happening. So I'm saying Steam is available on the Apple App Store. The spirit of it is one or more of the gaming platforms out there, whether it be Epic or GOG, somebody is going to have a dedicated store on Apple platforms, and there'll probably be some kind of translation layer in place to allow these games to work on Apple devices. By then, the damn chips are going to be so powerful that I don't think that emulation in that way is going to be that much of a problem. But I think this is going to happen, and I think this is the wave of the future. I think we're going to see many more storefronts on Apple devices. And honestly, I don't know how I feel about that, because I kind of like the fact that my Apple devices are all locked down. But at the same time, I like the idea of having my Steam library on my iPad. So yeah, that's my pick.
So you're specifically talking iPhone, iPad. You're not including Mac because.
Well, I mean, you can get the Steam.
I know. I just want to make sure.
Mac.
I just want to make sure. There is a Mac App Store on there too.
There's a Mac App Store, but I mean, the point, Steam is already available on Mac OS.
Yeah. I can see there being something. I'm very curious the logistics of it, just because, the stuff would have to work. Like you said, I guess it could be emulated. I guess it would depend on what it is.
Well, also, I'm not saying the entire Steam library would be available on the iPad or iPhone. I'm saying a Steam store would be available Okay, let me reword this slightly. Steam is available on the Apple App Store. I don't mean you're going to be able to download Steam from the App Store. I mean, there's going to be...
Oh, no, I get it.
This was badly worded. Steam is available as an App Store on Apple devices.
Right. Yes. I could see that, but I'm curious how the games would work. What kind of library would you get? How many games are going to even work on... I know you can pair controllers and keyboards and stuff, but most people are not going to do that. So they would have to work with the touchscreen.
And I'm flashing back to the pages and pages and pages of random questionable games that we've waded through for coming this week.
Oh, yeah.
Hilary, I think that's the main reason why Apple wants to keep this stuff locked down, which is one of the reasons why I think that they would be smart to partner with a company like Steam to make sure they have a measure of control over what is available on the Steam store.
Valve lets everything go on Steam, though. Now they do.
So maybe not a complete Steam store, but...
Yeah, but Apple would be... The amount of users that Steam would get out of this and playtime and everything else, I think that they would be willing to compromise.
Is the Steam store on Android devices and similar?
No.
I think there are two outcomes here. Either Apple keeps fighting like hell to keep non-Apple storefronts off their devices, which they're doing it now anyway. I just don't know if it lasts for 4 years. Or the other outcome is... the Steam store, the Epic Games Store, possibly also the Microsoft Store, all find their way onto Apple devices. Because they either need to allow as many storefronts as they can and hopefully get a cut, or try to keep things under their own control as much as they can. I know they're running into EU and other government issues with this, whether it...
There's some movement in Japan right now as well.
Yeah, and but also like... I mean, would this mean you also need to have the Apple Store available on Android devices? Like that's maybe a dumb question, but I think that device exclusivity is not dying out, but it is flattening out a little bit. Like we're seeing Nintendo games made for phones. I mean, they're not made by Nintendo, but just things like Pokemon Go and Mario Run are still a thing. And a lot of Sony AAA games are on PC storefronts now, including Steam. So I think those barriers are dissolving a little bit. It would take a big, like a Berlin Wall falling level of borders shutting down for Steam and Microsoft Store and to be on Apple devices, but it's possible. I looked at this one and I felt like I didn't know enough about the ongoing Apple stuff to have a good idea of the timeline, but it's something that of course could happen.
I think that it's something that Apple doesn't want to happen, but I think it's the opening up and multiple app stores with less restrictions than currently happen is going to happen.
They're fighting against it right now at this moment. But the question is, how long are they able to keep the other players at bay?
At which point, I think Apple, as a strategic move, would be real smart to look at Steam and say, okay, we want to go into partnership with you specifically, and here's what we're willing to give you, because it does two things. One, it eliminates the problems with the EU because they've opened it up to a completely other storefront, and it also fixes their game problem instantly in one swoop.
I know you mentioned this, but I think that them partnering with Epic is also very likely, just so they can stop these ongoing lawsuits about Fortnite on Apple devices.
Yeah, but that's one of the reasons I think they'll go with Steam, just because they just a nice middle finger to Epic.
We play Valorant on iPhones.
You realize the one downside of all of that happening, Jono, is that when they have an Apple event, you and I don't get to talk about what bizarre choice of game they decided to showcase the power of modern devices.
Don't worry, Mike. I'm sure they'll still show Diablo Immortal somewhere to showcase the power of the iPad.
Or Resident Evil 4.
Oh God, that was
yeah. Okay.
Apple and games it's been stupid forever, and it just keeps getting stupider.
Can you play Skyrim on an Apple Watch yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Soon. That's not my prediction, though.
No. Every once in a while, they'll get a developer or a game on stage, and I'm like, wait a minute. But then, like, that's the only one. I'm like, oh, they didn't figure it out.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know if I want to pick a bummer that I think is likely to happen or something that I kind of want to happen that's way less likely. Mm-hmm. If I'm playing to win, again, the two I'm looking at are kind of either boring or sad. Yeah, well, I just don't want to see that, though.
Pick one that's going to make you happy.
All right. Oh boy, I'm gonna regret this. Square Enix announces a new Chrono game for console.
Oh, I would love that.
The thing is, Square Enix knows they have a good library. They've had a mini renaissance recently. And I mean, whatever you think of things like Asano Studio or the Abundant Pixel remasters or the very, very big pushes for Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. The truth of the matter is they have a lot of things cooking right now. And they're getting real weird. Like, I mean, I don't think there were very many people expecting the HD2D Live Alive remake.
No.
A couple of years ago until shortly before it was announced. And so I think that they know that Chrono is a beloved property. And I think that they know that, and we know that Hironobu Sakaguchi and Yuji Horii have worked with Square Enix recently. I mean, Sakaguchi only recently because of Square Enix publishing the Fantasian remake / port for consoles. Mm-hmm. So we know that, and this is going to get a bummer for a second, but 2/3 of the Dream Team are at least in their, in their Rolodex, and the third has unfortunately passed. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how important people like Masato Kato are to them because he was the writer of Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. But if they wanted to reassemble some Chrono people and make a new Chrono game, they could. Whether it is actually connected to Chrono Trigger or Chrono Cross, I think that's unlikely because it's just been so long. But they have not forgotten these games because there was the Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers remaster just a year or two ago. And I think that they know that this would create a sensation among their old school fans if they were to release a Chrono 3. For a while, they had the name Chrono Break trademarked, but that was a long time, and I think that's since lapsed.
Yep.
But I think that they've had meetings about this. Do we do another Chrono? And I'm sure they've had meetings about it. Probably most of those meetings resulted in no's. But I'm gonna avoid bummers like
follow up one.
Well, I almost did console games are going to feature more advertisements, or AI dramatically increases speed of game development, and basically just I decided to avoid a bummer and have one late round hopeful pick,
one ray of sunshine.
And I mean, if they can bring back Mana and have it look as good as Visions of Mana does, then maybe in 2 or 3 years they can bring back Chrono.
Okay, you want to know what, Sollosi? I'm going to do you a favor here. I'm going to open this up a little bit more. First off, I just want to mention that this is 27 as Square Enix announces a new Chrono game on consoles. Number 28 is Square Enix announces a new Chrono game, but it's mobile only. So I'm glad that you did not go the horribly
I think the
pessimistic route.
The likelier outcome is that they release a new Chrono game on consoles and a mobile version a year later after the console version is successful. Like maybe Chrono, if a Chrono console game happens, maybe they get their own version of Champions of the Continent or whatever the Bravely Default one of those was called.
But Sollosi, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to open this up for you, and I'm going to say HD 2D remake counts.
Oh, in that case, I would have drafted this over a round ago. We're getting HD 2D Chrono by 2027.
Okay,
I could see.
So
it.
Yeah, that's 27. I don't have an argument about this. I want to see this. I think everyone wants to see it. I think there's a lot of things in the way, but at some point, I think that they would be fools not to do it.
Yeah.
Although you're right. Like I said, I think that the HD2D remake version is, if that's not next in their queue, they're making a mistake.
Right.
I was thinking specifically of Chrono 3, but again, if the Live Alive remake can happen, if Visions of Mana can happen, if the Trials of Mana remake from 4 years ago can happen, then a new Chrono, I think, is a possibility that does defend me.
Yeah.
I'm counting HD2D as new, because if they just released like an HD version of Chrono, like it's the same thing, but now with a slight HD upgrade where like that, I wouldn't include that as a new Chrono game, because HD2D requires entirely new assets.
If they told me they were just re-releasing Chrono Trigger on consoles and the only change was the screen shakes a little bit when Robo gets a critical hit, I would still buy that.
Yes. So would I. I'll also like the other one, the one that we're not using, the mobile one. I think that would have happened by now if they wanted to do that.
I think it almost did. Apparently Final Fantasy Dimensions 2 was
that's true.
Planned to be a Chrono Trigger sequel. It's one of the reasons why thematically there are so many similarities between it and the Chrono series.
I know.
I'm really glad that didn't happen.
I really need to play that one.
Yeah, the Mana mobile game that I couldn't remember the name of was Echoes of Mana.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the Bravely Default mobile game I couldn't remember the name of was Bravely Default Brilliant Lights. So like,
which we never get.
Yeah, exactly. But we did get, I think, 3 of the 4 or 5 Dragon Quest mobile games that came out with. One of which I have a sordid history with that I'd rather not get into. and I mentioned Octopath Traveler: Champions of the Continent. Like Square Enix is no stranger to companion mobile games, but I think that they wouldn't just make Chrono a mobile game.
Right.
Yeah. And one last thing, I just feel like I have to say something more since I ran like a Chrono site for like years, even though you can't get to it anymore. I don't want this to sound like disrespectful at all, because like I think one of the reasons maybe it never happened is because like trying to the stars that aligned for that team to come together at a time when Square and NX were separate companies was unheard of at the time.
Yeah, they hung out in a hotel room in San Francisco and came up with the idea like on napkins or something.
Yeah. So, and I obviously respect that. It's probably still one of my favorite. It is one of my favorite RPGs. I don't know. I mean, obviously in one case you can't bring the person back. I don't know that it necessarily has to be the same people, which I know sounds like heresy.
No, yeah,
but
it doesn't. But also, I mean, Toriyama and Hori and were not involved in Chrono Cross.
True.
But I was just saying that like if they had to bring back some of the same people, they could.
Yeah.
But and Japanese developers have a or at least Square Enix has a weird tendency of of wanting the original people there. Like they didn't want to do the FF7 remake without Nomura's full cooperation. And the only reason that Saga games are still being made is because Kawazu is like the longest tenured employee at Square Enix or something.
Right.
So I only brought that up because a lot of Japanese developers have unusual care about making sure the original people are there.
Yeah.
Or at least on board.
Or at least on board. Yeah, exactly.
No, that's a good point.
I think that they would take the care to do it. The history is there, right?
Yeah. No, that's a good point, because I was thinking of Visions of Mana, how like the producer now is not like he has not been the producer the entire series, but they also made a very, very strong case to be like, hey, see, the original monster designer is on board. I'm like, okay, yes, you're right.
Yeah. History is important. Yeah. And although, could you imagine what would happen if at not E3 in 2027 we got a HD 2D Chrono sequel? Like if they just did a HD 2D Chrono sequel, I would lose my mind, and so would everyone else.
Yep.
Anyway, let's move on now to our next, our Mike, your final pick.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go a different direction, because I actually was also going to pick the ads in games, but it's too depressing.
It's too depressing.
Even though EA will do it.
That was the one highest on my board, but it was just too much of a bummer, so I decided not to.
Don't like.
For the record, for those out there, it is ads will start showing up in major console games, on pause screens, pop-ups, etc.
I
was thinking specifically loading screens on my PS5.
Yep.
That's where they're going to go.
It'll be just like the pause screens on Hulu.
That's so funny because I was going to do it.
Were you?
Yep.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Well, don't tell us now.
You still can. That might be a guaranteed point.
Yeah, since all of us said we don't want to do it. Okay. Well, I'm looking again. I'm gonna change my mind here. It's kind of a weird one, but I kind of would be interested in seeing Valve announcing a console / PC, because they keep doing more with their hardware. And I wouldn't have guessed the Steam controller and the Steam Deck, but boy, the Steam Deck has taken off.
Yeah.
I could see it. I could sort of see it. It would be, I mean, it could be like a more powerful Steam Deck without the screen, because like you can already dock the Steam Deck to your TV. I don't think it's unlikely.
I don't think it's unlikely either. I think the question is whether or not they want to do it. They have some experience with connecting stuff up to television sets that did not go particularly well for them.
True.
But the success of the Steam Deck, I think it makes it real tempting to create a high-end gaming PC that runs Linux, that runs their software with their what I can't remember the name of the thing they use to make their games compatible. But I could see that happening, and I can see them releasing it for $400, $500, approximately the same. I think that Valve is the only major player out there who actually has the ability to challenge Sony as a leading console manufacturer.
Well, the thing about it is they already have most of the infrastructure. They like Steam is,
they have their storefront.
Yeah, Steam is enormous, and they've already made hardware with the Steam Deck. So I think that if they just like made a PC dumb enough to behave like a console, and then have it go directly to your Steam page, that's very, very possible. The only thing is like how necessary do they think this is, and how crowded do they think the market is? And if they I almost asked if I could combine like three of these predictions into one, and say that like Microsoft abandons the Xbox and teams up with Valve to make a Microsoft Store Steam like Steam machine. Because I think that both of them are way more interested in just selling games on their digital storefronts than actually making a ton of hardware. Because again, there's like three of these that are sort of on those tracks. But yeah, I mean, Steam. I mean, Valve could do it. I don't know if they care to, because of how crowded the console market is, and I don't even know what their internal numbers look like. With like how really is Steam doing against Epic and the Microsoft Store? Like they're super interesting questions, but I just I didn't know enough about any of them to realistically pick them, but they're interesting to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, I admit when I saw this question on the list, I was thinking of the Atari VCS, which is basically a very minimal PC. I was looking at
that's the prediction I didn't put on the list. I should have said Atari returns as a major player in the video game industry.
Oh, well, they're trying. They have this console thing that's really just a PC with
I'm adding that to the long shot predictions.
32 gigs of storage. So that's not going to work.
And I mean, genuinely, the Atari 50th anniversary game, Atari 50, is actually super, super cool. It's both like a documentary tour through the history of Atari games and a collection of, I think, 50 Atari games. It's that thing is worth getting, but I wouldn't seriously look at Atari anything for reasons other than nostalgia.
No.
Yeah.
Actually,
but Atari 50 is a genuinely very, very cool package that is worth checking out.
I think they are doing unless I just read it in a fever dream, I think they're actually doing an expanded version of that soon with more games and more behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, possibly. It only came out like I want to say 2 years ago, but I'm interested in any kind of game preservation activity Digital Eclipse does. I mean, they also made the Mega Man Legacy collections, which of course I'm into them. But Atari 50 is good. I'll take my answer off the air.
Okay, Hill, your last pick. Are you going to go for the cynical one? Do not let our peer pressure hit you, because this is almost a guaranteed point, I would argue.
No, I know. And the problem is that I'm very, very tempted to do it just because I want a point. So you know what? Let's say that yes, that is what I'm going to do. But the other one I was interested in was the HD 2D of like a Bahamut Lagoon or a Treasure of the Rudras, something like that. I don't know if it would be both in the time frame. That's a little bit of a gamble, but I don't think it's at all unrealistic to expect more of those.
I don't think so either. But you are picking number 23.
Yeah.
Which is ads will start showing up in major game consoles, on pause screens, pop-ups, etc.
I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate it. I think it's happening. I mean, we're gonna get more ads on like athletes' jerseys, not just European soccer.
Oh, no.
We're gonna get ads. When we have self-driving cars, ads are gonna play on our internal screens. I mean,
they already do, like in taxis and some ride shares.
Yeah.
Look, video game, and I mean, I am still angry every time I have to watch ads at the gas pump. But
Yeah.
video games are a business. They're always looking for more ways they can squeeze out more money without completely betraying or alienating their customer base.
Yeah.
I think sneaking in ads in the least offensive places they can find are in our future. My thought was loading screens, but there are many other similar avenues for it. Again, I think this prediction is a bit of a bummer, but I think it's also quite likely.
It's an extremely safe bet, and I'm going to try and make it slightly less of a bummer by saying not everybody will do it. Hopefully,
Right.
but
Yeah.
somebody.
Like it would start with the bigger ones.
But someone would.
And it sort of
You want to know what? You want to know what, though, Hilary? It's the same thing as what Sollosi was saying earlier about like $100 games.
I was just going to say that.
One person needs to announce the $100 game, and if it sells, everyone will bruise their games at the $100 price point.
That's sad.
Well, okay, that's not what I was going to say. I was going to talk about the part where like game prices have not gone up in ratio with budgets. So like this is another thing that's like, well, because if they're keeping games, yes, it would. Yeah, that.
So maybe if we get the $100 games, we won't have to worry about this.
Well, the thing is, we already have the $100 games, but they're in things like what's the word I'm looking for? Season passes,
special editions, DLC packs.
Yeah, exactly, all of that. And again, I've bought a couple of $100 games by that measure, probably several, and sometimes I'm willing, like I definitely am for Street Fighter 6, but the question is an actual standalone AAA game costing $100 up front
as a base,
as the base number. That when that happens, I will be surprised, but it probably should have happened a while ago.
I think that with this ad thing, probably what we'll see first, they'll go real safe. They'll go with either other games in the series of the game you're playing, or if it's a new one, games like it from the same developer. So they can be like, well, it's safe. It's their stuff. But eventually they will be selling just crap, absolute crap. And there's going to be games. It's going to show up in games too. Like you're going to be driving down a digital representation of Times Square, and you're going to be driving through Times Square, and there's going to be actual ads everywhere that change depending on who wants to buy them at the time. It'll be sold like actual, ad real estate in Times Square.
I love that you think it'll be other games at first, because we all know it's going to start with Mountain Dew. And I say that as someone who this morning went to get gas and watched a Mountain Dew commercial at the gas pump of a bunch of quote unquote gamers going into a gas station with their Mountain Dew points and walking out with things like PCs and collector's editions of the Elder Scrolls. I'm not making any of that up.
So you're telling me there's a new flavor of Mountain Dew? Can I get it in a zero sugar version?
Probably.
Will it be extreme? Oh God. Okay. Well, that is a guaranteed point, I think, Hilary. And okay, I'm trying to decide whether or not now to go for a ray of sunshine for my final one, or to go for an interesting conversation. I'm going to go for an interesting conversation rather than the ray of sunshine. I'm setting myself up to lose all of these, by the way, but I don't care, because these are just things that are of interest to me that I would either like to see happen or am interested in seeing happen, though I don't necessarily hope they do. I'm going to choose for my final pick A Chinese-based studio releases a clear frontrunner for Game of the Year in 2024, 2025, 2026, or 2027. It doesn't need to be all 4 years, but just a Chinese-based studio releases a clear frontrunner for Game of the Year.
I don't know if you expected this from me, but this was very high on my list. I think it's sixth. I almost picked this one. But before I comment, I want you to go ahead.
This one is so loaded with cultural expectations and racism and a lot of things that I would prefer to avoid. The Chinese gaming industry is rife with, I know this is a loaded term, Chinese knockoffs. That's a historical term because, you go and you can buy Chinese knockoffs of everything from Apple headphones to your video game systems. And that is the case with a lot of Chinese video games, where they will go and they will not just make a similar game. They will copy it bit for bit. However, in the last few years, there have been significant pushes in the Chinese gaming industry to create more original works and original IP that is of a AAA level quality. And I think it's just a matter of time before it breaks through. Now, there are a lot of things that could be argued against this. One being that artistic expression in China is tremendously limited as compared to most other countries that make video games. So that limits the subject matter that they can be releasing. But if the mechanics are there, and if the graphics are there, and if the gameplay is there, I think a lot of gamers might forgive that lack of artistic freedom in terms of the expression of the storyline and embrace it. Now, I do not think it will win, because I do think that I don't think that Jeff is racist, but I think that the politics and the optics of a Chinese-based studio releasing winning Game of the Year would open them up. It would open the Game Awards up to some really nasty shit coming from online. Some of it justified, some of it not. But yeah, I think it's going to happen. I think the Chinese gaming industry is on the verge of something. I think it's been growing, and I think it's going to break in the next few years. And I think it's going to become an even bigger player than it already is in the critically acclaimed sphere.
When I think of the Chinese game industry, I don't necessarily think of knockoffs. I think of just a lot of isolation. They have had video games for decades that are very successful, but the thing is, they're only in China. Like, I think Crossfire has over 1 billion total players, but they but it's sometimes considered, oh yeah, that's just Chinese Counter-Strike. I mean, a popular podcast I used to listen to all the time, one of their ongoing mantras was China don't care, because the Chinese market and the Chinese government does not care about what is happening outside of China for the most part. China is an enormous country that runs on one time zone because they don't care about other people's time zones. They have this whole interior game industry going on for decades, and MMOs that are twice the size of WoW, but they don't care about other MMOs besides the Chinese one. But so the thing is, China they have development talent and development money, because companies like NetEase and Tencent just have more money than I want to think about, frankly. But I believe they are trying to diversify and go global for the first time. I mean, Honor of Kings is a mobile MOBA that I think has over 100 million daily players.
Oh.
And when I first heard about them, because they had an Honor of Kings character was added to Samurai Showdown.
Oh,
and I'm like, what the hell is Honor of Kings? What the hell? Honor of Kings is more popular than every game I love. But more recently, what's that game that I hate talking about?
Is it Genshin Impact?
It is Genshin Impact.
Okay.
That's
exactly what I was going to mention.
Genshin Impact and their more recent game, Honkai Star Rail, have made huge splashes mostly in the mobile space. But there are I think Steam and PS4 versions of Genshin Impact. Mm-hmm. So and I think that there's a pretty big AAA Chinese title coming soon called Black Myth Wukong, that people say is kind of like a Journey West flavored Souls game.
Apparently based on it.
And I mean, I mentioned NetEase and Tencent. I mean, NetEase hired Toshiro Nagoshi, the creator of Like a Dragon, away from Sega to head an internal studio there. China has a lot of resources and a lot of manpower, and they are going to try to apply it to globally released AAA games soon. And and none of them has to be a winner for Game of the Year. They just have to be a contender for this prediction to work. And I think that is a real possibility, only because this is a huge region full of video game interest that is going to make a global impact for the first time soon. And don't ever expect a Genshin Impact episode of Retro Encounter. That's all I got there.
I'd like to, before we continue, I'd like to recommend a video. I made this list months ago, but I saw a video it's a YouTube video called China's Plan to Clone the Entire Gaming Industry by a YouTuber by the name of Belinda Ercan, Ercan. Great video that explores the Chinese gaming industry and how they clone and copy and iterate in a way that is fascinating and very contrary to how many of how we look at iteration.
I mean, it's a copycat industry, but based on the tone of that video, I mean, probably China takes it to an extreme.
Well, it's one of the interesting points that she makes in the video, which is very, very true, is because of content regulations and restrictions in China, many Western games can't be released in China. So when that happens, a lot of Chinese developers swoop in to fill the void by creating quote unquote knockoffs that emulate the look, feel, gameplay, mechanics, and everything else of a game, but better fit what is allowed.
What is allowed.
Weren't Nintendo consoles allowed in China for the first time just a couple of years ago?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. Also, this particular pick could be derailed if the Chinese government just suddenly decides to have a massive crackdown on the video game industry in China, which is not outside of the realm of possibility.
But I think equally possible is that China's government might funnel money to the video game industry as a form of making Chinese games popular worldwide, right, as a version of soft power. Like the Thailand government paid for like tens of thousands of their citizens to move to first world countries to make Thai cuisine popular worldwide. So if that worked for Thailand, and I say this is someone who ate some pad Thai less than 48 hours ago, then maybe this could happen for Chinese video games.
I imagine that their eye is on that prize. Yeah,
I can see it. I mean, we mentioned Black Myth Wukong, but I've also seen there's one called AI Limit coming out that looks pretty good. Phantom Blade Zero.
Hey, that was Hilary's pick, huh? A major video games developed using AI. Yes, AI Limit, done. Win. Check mark.
Phantom Blade Zero kind of looks like a Sekiro game, and it looks really, really good. I've had that wish listed for about a year.
It really does, yeah.
And it's not like the Western industry doesn't clone games.
It's always been a copycat industry, but I think that, I mean, especially based on that video you mentioned, the Chinese game industry might take it to an extreme.
Yeah, in their case, it's a flat out copy rather than iterating on things like the Doom likes of the 1990s, for example, which gave birth to an entirely new genre. That's what iteration does. But there needs to be some form of innovation attached to that. Let's do something new with this mechanic. And that's what I think a lot of Chinese video games are starting to do. And I think that if they're given the freedom to do so, I don't think they're ever going to win a narrative award because they're restricted by what they can do. But mechanics, looks, graphics, everything, yeah, it could win Game of the Year.
Yeah. I want to make a Doom knockoff now and just call it Mood. Just flip it backwards.
That just makes me think of the reality show Project Runway, because the fabric store where they got a lot of materials was a place in New York called Mood.
It's a great name for a fabric store.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're approaching the end, but before we go, there is one other thing. So everybody gets 1 point for each prediction they get. However, I have 7 long shot predictions here. You must pick one of them, and if you get this prediction right, you get 3 points. These are ridiculous, and we don't need to talk about them. We're just going to pick them one after the other. So we'll go with the same order. Sollosi, pick your long shot prediction.
7. I only have 6 here.
Oh, I've updated it. Sorry, Atari returns as a major player in the video game industry.
Okay, all right, never mind. My list of 6 works just fine then. Well, okay. I mean, I don't really believe in any of these, but the one that I am the least irritated by is Valve counts to 3. Valve is one of the most successful game companies in the world. We've already talked about Steam and Steam Decks and Valve hardware a lot this episode. But I mean, Valve does have that their new hero shooter coming out soon, Deadlock. So we know that they are capable of making video games.
Still make games.
Yeah, other than Dota 2, they can still make games allegedly.
And they released Half-Life Alyx, but that's not Half-Life 3.
Correct. So I think that it would be a lot of gamer goodwill would be earned if they announced Half-Life 3 or Portal 3.
Yes.
They would probably be massive sellers. Especially because it's extremely easy. I mean, they practically give away every other Half-Life game in Portal 1 and 2 for free now. Portal 2 is one of my favorite games of the 2010s. That game absolutely holds up is
astoundingly good.
Has one of the, I think, the most underrated co-op modes I've ever played.
Yep.
But I think that it's not a safe prediction, but it's my favorite prediction of these 6 because I'm still not acknowledging the Atari one.
Incidentally, if Valve ever counted the 3 with Portal 3 and released it as a VR only, I think that the prediction up there that we know when picked VR gaming becomes mainstream actually might gain some traction.
Yeah, fair.
Okay, Mike, you pick your long shot prediction.
Okay. I like number 2. Xbox leaves the hardware business because I can sort of see it.
Yeah.
Unless they partner with Valve or do something else. Like, I don't know how much I know they keep making hardware, but I don't know how much they really care about it or need it.
Does that count as them leaving the hardware business, though, if they partner with them or leave the hardware? Because it seems like a logical, path of least resistance that might count.
Yeah. I mean, we had a discussion about this earlier. I think that Microsoft is way more interested in selling Game Pass subscriptions than they are selling Xboxes. And I
think they want to be a storefront.
Yeah, and Game Pass. I mean, they do have a storefront, but they want their main business to be that storefront. So, I mean, if they can sell Game Passes on Apple devices, if that other prediction holds true later, then maybe they will exit. This was probably my second favorite on this list, other than Valve.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Hilary, your pick.
All right. Well, my pick was taken, and so I'll just add really quickly that I want Valve to count to 3 so badly because some developers I really, really like are allegedly working on Half-Life 3, if I'm not mistaken. So I want that to just be done. So they
you're thinking of Half-Life Alyx.
Oh, shoot.
That's why I thought you had that reaction when Jono brought up Half-Life Alyx, because that game is why
that was the VR. Yeah,
that's
that was
why
the
in
VR
the Valley of Gods.
Okay,
went away.
Yes. All right, never mind. Well, whatever helps them free that team up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I guess so. I'm going to have to rethink everything. I think I'm going to do something hopeful, and I would like some more kind of cheesy goodness in the world. So I'm going to say a new Lunar game.
I would love a new Lunar game.
A new Lunar game is announced. That will never happen.
I know.
But it would be lovely if it did. It would be lovely if it did.
Shot.
There's a reason why these are all long shot predictions.
Yep.
But a new Lunar game being released, I think that would be wonderful. Wonderful it would happen.
If it does happen, it would have to be one of those just complete out of nowhere, shocking.
Oh, yeah.
Shocking long shot predictions. But, someone's got to believe it, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, for the record, here's what I have left in my long shot prediction list. Apple buys Nintendo. Nintendo announces an R-rated live-action adaptation of Metroid.
Which is funny to me.
NFTs make a huge comeback. Or Sollosi's favorite, Atari returns as a major player in the video game industry. I'm going to go with Nintendo announces an R-rated live-action adaptation of Metroid.
You see, if this was a PG-13 adaptation of Metroid, I might have picked this.
Okay.
But Nintendo's not going to release an R-rated anything, so no thanks.
I think that I would love to watch this. This would be an amazing film, providing they basically just remade Alien.
We know. I mean, maybe they'd have to change Ridley's name if they did that.
Yeah,
because
right.
the crazy thing about this is Nintendo is moving into films. I think that the Super Mario Brothers animated film movie is already one of the top 5 highest grossing animated films of all time. And we know that a live action Legend of Zelda is in development. Live action Metroid in development makes all the sense in the world, but because it's Nintendo, I absolutely do not think it's going to be R-rated.
Yep, that's why I put the R-rated in the thing. I wrote originally, I was like, that's actually not outside of the realm of possibility. R-rated live adaptation of Metroid. There we go.
Gotta make this more implausible.
Could they keep Ridley as Ridley if they actually got Ridley Scott to voice him?
It's too obvious. Maybe change the name to Sigourney or something like that.
What if they made an R-rated Animal Crossing that's basically something like Glengarry Glen Ross with all the profanity and everything, except it's about turnips.
Okay.
I mean, Tom Nook is pretty close.
Yeah.
It's just him with his army of raccoons giving them the knife block speech.
Fossils are for closers.
And for the record, we have a free space here. Everybody gets a point if Mother 3 is released in the West.
That is truly a scenario where everyone wins.
Yeah.
Everyone wins. So for the record, those I probably should have been writing these down as I went so we could it doesn't matter. Listen to the episode again if you want to know what our picks are. The ones that were not picked, for the record, are the new Nintendo console is fully backwards compatible with the Switch.
I think that is actually going to happen.
It's a given.
I think that's going to happen, but I already picked a Switch thing, so I didn't double up on that.
That was on my list, but I was being chaotic.
Yep. RGG Studios announces a Like a Dragon game starring one or more former antagonists. I would like to see it. I don't know if it will or not.
My prediction for that would be Yamai if it happens.
Sony acquires Square. I just love the idea that all of the villains have their own bars and all of them team up. That's because that's what happens to a Yakuza villain after they die. They open a bar. That's not a spoiler, by the way. I guess it kind of is, but
that only happened to one villain, because Kashiwagi is not a villain in any sense of the word. Even though
you're not wrong.
Even though he is a boss fight in Yakuza 0.
Yes. Okay. Sony acquires Square Enix. I don't think so. VR gaming becomes mainstream. I don't think so.
Unless it's Portal.
Unless it's Portal. The Walt Disney Company purchases EA. That might actually happen.
I would think about that, because EA does not cost as much as the 20th Century Fox acquisition that they did a few years ago. And also Disney is interested in gaming because they just announced a big partnership with Epic Games last year.
Yep. Square Enix announces the next Final Fantasy remake series. I think this might actually happen, but I don't think it's going to be as big as Final Fantasy VII's. Phil Spencer is fired and/or resigns from Microsoft Gaming. I don't know if that'll happen or not, but it was an interesting one. Square Enix announces remakes of Bahamut's Lagoon or Treasure of the Rudras. I think this is going to happen. I don't know if they'll be HD 2D, but they're running out of Super Nintendo games that they've never released here in the West, and those are the only 2 left.
That's pretty deep in their back catalog, so I don't know how much interest there is in those. But I mean, because they're remaking everything else, that's probably on a list somewhere.
Yep. E3 returns. Wah, wah. Microsoft announces a portable console to compete with the Switch successor and the Steam Deck. This was paired up with the Sony announces a portable console. I actually think this is more likely than Sony doing a portable console, and not just because the man whose firing we have predicted in this document will not shut the hell up about it. AI will dramatically increase the speed of video game development. And nice pairing up there with a major video games developed using AI. I think this is actually... I think it might increase the speed of video game development. I do not think it's going to decrease the cost of video game development.
That was high on my list, right up there with ads and Chinese studio. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Square Enix will announce... I'm sorry. I'm very, very sorry to all the fans out there. Square Enix will announce a new MMORPG designed to replace Final Fantasy XIV.
I mean, that's going to happen, but only when Yoshi P is damn well ready, and I don't think he is.
No.
Nintendo will announce an MMO set in one of their big franchises. Honestly, I probably should have put that in the long shot predictions.
So many of them could work, by the way. A Pokemon MMO would do so well, but they won't do it.
People have been dreaming of a Pokemon MMO for so long, but it would require a partnership that is unthinkable.
Mm-hmm. Square Enix announces a new Chrono game, but it's mobile only. I'm glad no one shows that. That is so cynical, but also not unlikely. Sega announces a remake of the Panzer Dragoon saga. I think that might actually happen at some point. It's just sitting there. It's just sitting there. Just do something with it. And finally, the one that we came up with on the fly, there will be a strike at one of the major video game developers. That is the list, ladies and gentlemen. So we have our picks. 4 years from now, on April 9th, 2028, we will come back here and we will talk about this list, and someone will win a video game. Or someone will win a video game, or I'll save myself. Well, actually, by that point, I might be saving myself $100.
That's true.
Yeah, so that is episode number 300, Random Encounter 300. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're looking for something else to enjoy, here's a great thing to buy from our shop. It is our collaboration with Hyperplay RPG, our RPGFan review card collection. So this is a collection of the review cards that you may have seen on Instagram or other social media channels. Little bite-sized reviews. Love these things, love them so much. I love this book. I have 2 copies on my shelf. It is just a wonderful, wonderful book, and I highly recommend it to everyone out there. And that's not the only thing. We also have lots of other things at our shop, which you can find at www.rpgfan.com/shop. Another way to support us here is to listen to some of our podcasts. You're listening to one right now. If you missed last week's episode of Random Encounter, we were talking about Monster Hunter Stories 1 and 2 and the news that came out of the Nintendo Direct. And the episode before that, it was our Big Naughty 3 episode. So big news for the last month. It's been a lot of news for the last month. We are not the only podcast here at RPG Fan, though. We also have Retro Encounter starring Mr. Mike Sollosi. Sollosi, tell us what's going on Retro Encounter.
Right. Well, last week we released a top 11 PlayStation 4 RPGs episode. It was 11 because in our formula there was a tie for 10th. And just before that, we had episodes on Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, 2 episodes on Grandia 2, and next week is the perhaps long-awaited quiz show episode number 6. So if you want to hear a bunch of RPG Fan staff compete in a video game quiz show written by yours truly, that's the way to do it next week.
If there is one thing that Sollosi likes even more than a draft, it's a quiz show.
I do love quiz shows more than just about anyone else I know.
So that is Retro Encounter. We also have Rhythm Encounter, which is RPG Fan's music podcast, hosted by Hilary and Mike. What do we have on for the next week?
Well, I'm also going to cover last couple episodes quickly, but our last couple episodes, we did an episode on pirate music.
Jar.
Hilary hosted that one. It was
Yes.
a lot of fun.
You can tell because I had the most enthusiastic R.
Yes. After that, our most recent episode, as of this recording, was an episode about jazz, funk, and city pop music.
One was fun.
That was a lot of fun. We just recorded that a few days ago. And coming up next on Rhythm Encounter, we are doing indie game music, and then we're doing 2 back-to-back console episodes of DS game music and then PSP music.
Incidentally, city pop would be kind of like a good soundtrack while mulling over these predictions.
Oh, that's true. Well, it's too late now.
Quick throw city pop song in there.
It's never too late to play Plastic Love by Maria Takeuchi, okay? Never too late.
Well, if you'd like to get in contact with us here at Random Encounter, you can do so by firing me off a message at podcast@rpgfan.com. If you have any suggestions for future episode ideas or discussion questions, anything else you'd like to share, this is episode 300. We plan to just keep on going, ladies and gentlemen, and I have quite a few ideas for the future as well. So please, fire me off some mail. I'd love to hear it. If you'd like to send me an email directly, you can do so at jlogan@rpgfan.com. You can also find me on Mastodon. You can't find me on Mastodon. Who the hell am I kidding? I'm not on Mastodon. I have an account on Mastodon, but I haven't updated it for like a year and a half. But if you wanted to check it out, it's Jono Logan at Mastodon.social. I'm not the only person, though, with a social media presence. Sollosi, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Instagram, Blue Sky, or RPG Fans Discord. On all 3 places, I am at Evoker for Dogs.
Tremendous. Hilary, where can we find you?
So lately I've been mentioning my RPG Fan email, which is hilary@rpgfan.com. But I'm also going to say I'm EP Fire on the Discord because I've been hanging out there more recently.
So Hilary.
Yep.
Hilary. And Mike, where can we find you online?
You can't. Well, you can't.
Aside from, aside from the site.
You can, but I don't really update it anywhere. So if you want to get in contact with me, email is best. So mike@rpgfan.com.
Cool. If you enjoyed this 300th edition of Random Encounter, you can leave us a review out there on one of our, any of the channels, actually. You can share it with your friends. There's lots of ways you can support the podcast. And speaking of supporting the podcast, I really, really would like to thank Hilary, Mike, Sollosi, all of you for coming out and celebrating episode 300 with me. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate all of you and your time.
We appreciate you. Thanks for having us.
We're happy to be here. It was fun.
It was my pleasure, and it will be my pleasure again when you buy me a video game in 2028. Like a Dragon 9, all of Jono's wealth.
Okay, I should preface this by saying you only get the base game at this point.
Oh,
if
you
want,
can't. No, you can't do it now.
In 2028, that might cost all of your wealth.
You're not wrong, actually. And to everybody out there who is listening to this podcast and has listened to any or all of the 299 episodes that came before it, I would really, really like to thank you for your support. And again, whatever you are playing, have fun.